Let's break down what HRV is. I think there's kind of misconceptions around what that is. Every time I start talking to a patient about it, they're like, wait, what is good and what's bad when it comes to heart rate variability? So can you kind of break down what that is, what that measurement is actually measuring? Hey everyone, Derek Hines here. Welcome to the podcast where I'll share with you the patterns, insights, research, and technologies that we use in my own pain and performance practice to help people improve their health, speed their healing, and increase their longevity. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. Love it. Dr. Torkil Færø, welcome to the Pain and Performance Podcast.
Thank you, Derek. Nice to be here. I've heard a couple of your episodes, and it seems like you're well versed in HRV and wearables and everything that I love to talk about. So this will be interesting.
Yeah, our listeners know that I love to geek out on the science of a lot of these things and can we actually put them into action, which is the fun part of some of this. When did HRV cross your radar as like a health metric?
That was actually, I was in a hammock in Moorea, the neighboring island to Tahiti. I was reading The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk on trauma and psychiatry. And I had never heard of it before. And I understood that it was such an important metric for general health and mental health. And so I got curious, and one thing led to another. And suddenly I was using all kinds of wearables and getting very nerdy about it. And then I've written a book that has been a bestseller in Norway for like 70 weeks. About how to use the wearables combined with the good lifestyles. So.
Love it. Yeah, this was one of those that was like, I feel like it was within the last 5 years that it started to become a thing that was, okay, we need to pay attention to this as a kind of measure of health. I don't know if I quite knew at that time really what it meant. I just knew that I needed to start measuring it.
Yeah, and now you have all these wearables, like the Oura Ring, the Garmin watches, Samsung is coming up with their Galaxy Ring and watches and so on. And I'm so happy as a doctor that there is money in keeping you healthy and taking the power of your health from the doctors and the hospitals into your own hands. And you have to control yourself in real time, So that's I think is a major shift in healthcare. So I'm very happy to be a part of moving, this.
So let's break down what HRV is. I think there's kind of misconceptions around what that is. Every time I start talking to a patient about it, they're like, wait, what is good and what's bad when it comes to heart rate variability? So can you kind of break down what that is, what that measurement is actually measuring?
Yeah, so heart rate variability is a way to look at the heart rate. So it's not the heart rate in itself, like it could be like 60 or 80 or whatever, the pulse rate, but it's the variation between heartbeats. And that tells us so much about our autonomic nervous system and the general physiology in our bodies, both mentally and physically. And what happens is that the heartbeat varies with the breathing. So when we breathe in and there is more oxygen in the lungs, the heart rate speeds up a little bit. And when we breathe out and there is less oxygen in the lungs, it slows down a little bit. And that is in the restful state, in the parasympathetic restful state that we need to be in, for maybe the major part of the day. And then if we are in the stress state, then regardless of whether we are breathing in or out, the heart will beat at a very steady pace. And these small differences measured in milliseconds, these devices can pick up and keep track of it, throughout day and night, so that we can see our physiological speed. And then with the artificial intelligence, and the measurements of like millions of people, we can tell whether we are in a sustainable stress balance or not. And that is so useful because we don't really have a sense for this. A lot of people say, oh, can't we just feel? We can't. Really. I wouldn't be able to feel whether I have 85 in heart rate or 60. It's not something we feel. And that would be a big difference in inflammation level or stress level. So we have very good senses for the outward threats, throughout evolution, animals, enemies, bad food, fire coming on, we have all these good senses. But for our inner state, we have never needed to develop it. It has just been, our lifestyle. We have rested when we didn't fight or hunt. We rested naturally, don't wasting any resources. But now we are living this kind of wild lifestyle, and not relaxing enough and doing something all the time, digitally or real. Not sleeping enough, eating the wrong food, so drinking alcohol. So we do kind of everything wrong.
It's I can soapbox that. It's so funny that like a lot of the things that we're trying to do that are like these therapeutic things are things that were just naturally in our environment. So like, one of the things we give our patients is like watch the sunrise and try and be in grass. Like that's such a simple thing. Like get outside.
Yeah.
Like that was just
Yeah.
part of normal human life. If you told somebody to do that 1,000 years ago, they'd have been like, so live. You're
Yeah.
telling me to live? That's it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And now
Yeah,
we
and
have to be
be
intentional about
cold.
those things.
Yeah, and be cold and exercise, and so and that is what's so beautiful about the technology, that the very new technology shows that we have to go back in time to get the solutions, and all the solutions are free. It's being cold, breathing, being out in nature, moving, it's all free. So, and that is also the problem, because there's no like commercial pressure behind it. So it's not easy to sell. It's easier to sell you something that will give you a dopamine kick, and like sugary stuff, and get dopamine kicks from your phones and all of that. So,
So
yeah,
it's always interesting whenever I'm having this conversation with a patient to explain that like when we're stressed more, our heartbeat is much more regular. There's less variability between those beats because of the stress state that we're in. So in that case, and you certainly correct me, the variability scores that we would measure through most of these things in milliseconds would be lower, and that lower variability means that it means something. It means that,
yeah.
for you, if that's lower than your normal, you're in more of a stress state or inflamed state or sympathetic state.
That's right. So your body is under stress. It's your immune system is compromised. It's not working at the top speed, So for whatever reason, it can be mental stress, it can be like normal stress that we all think about when you talk about stress, but it can also be stress. Once you start tracking this with your devices, you see that the stress comes from surprising places, from poor food, from candy, from chips, from eating ultra processed food, from alcohol, is just immense. People stop drinking alcohol or reduce it to a minimum once they start tracking it and seeing the physiological price of alcohol, which is a lot more expensive than the price tag. And altitude, also, particularly in the U.S., if you go up into the Rocky Mountains, and 3,000 meters, it will affect your system, and also for women, the menstrual cycle, PMS symptoms can be a huge stressor. And a lot of people are just pushing themselves too hard. They think that we're like machines. We can just go on and push on hard, and we're not designed for that. So you're just yeah, your immune system cannot work properly, and you will get sick.
Yeah, I think in those situations, if we rely on like our feeling, like, oh, do I feel the subjective, do I feel okay? Our body is so good at just kind of adapting to what we give it that by the time you get to where you're so run down that you just are exhausted and you're like, I just can't go today. You've passed over the hill and come all the way down, and now to get
Yeah,
out of that is a major thing. Whereas if we treat this like we do a blood test or something, where it's like, hey, before you let your vitamin D level get all the way to where you're deficient, let's see when you're starting to go down so that you don't end up with those symptoms. You don't wait until you say, oh, now I feel like crap.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And these devices would warn you to relax, and take it easy a long time before you have to because you're out of your powers. So in a burnout situation that so many people are in, so many employees. So that is probably the most important thing, that these devices will warn you against a burnout. So
So let's look like break this down. I was looking at I use an Aura ring, no affiliation, no nothing major, and I was looking at what my last couple of days of HRV, and I've had some later nights and earlier mornings lately. So I was like, actually, my HRV has been slightly lower these last 2 days. So yesterday it was on the Aura, and this is what I want to like know is like what are these devices measuring? It's 44 milliseconds and then yesterday was 37, and those are lower measurements for me than what would be typical. So if we're looking at those things, like, is there specific numbers that mean anything like kind of broadly across everyone? Or is it more of one of those things that it's like, let's find your normal and then make a decision based on tracking?
yeah, so you should find your normal, and of course, in general, in population studies, the lower the HRV, the more sick you would tend to be. But you cannot really use it for individual, considerations. So you have to think about what is your optimal HRV. So, like, even if another person would have, say, 60 and you would then have 37, you could have exactly the same health objectively. So there's a lot of variation genetically. It's supposed to be around 50%. But then in big population studies, then okay, the lower HRV is worse than a higher HRV.
What are those numbers? Like, what is a high HRV?
Yeah, I think yours, the numbers you mentioned would probably be quite average for your age, and then your better ones would probably then be a bit better, as you're probably in a good shape. If it's low, it could probably be down to 20. So some people in a poor level at your age could have down to 20. That is my impression.
So when we're looking at some of these, and I'm sure they all do it different, I'd love to dive into that. Is like, what does Aura measure versus Whoop versus, like, say, Garmin or something like that? But when I'm looking at that from Aura, is that an average? Do you know that they're running throughout the night and then they average that? I know.
Yeah, I think it's an average, and I think that Whoop will weigh the part in the deep sleep more, I think. So you would get a bit different numbers. I use all three of them, like Garmin, Whoop, and Aura, and they would have for a normal day, maybe my Garmin will be 45, my Whoop will be 40, and my Aura will be 35. But they will go up and down in parallel. So they just measure it a bit differently, and they all have some pros and cons, and they would all give you their assessment in a bit different way. So that is also why I like to have all three of them. Of course, I as I'm kind of the expert on this and writing books about it, I need to know more about the different wearables than other people. But I think it's good to have two devices so that you have kind of a second opinion. And I know the Aura is better at sleep assessment from the sleep phases, and the Garmin would be better for workouts and in general. So if I would choose one, that's definitely Garmin. So it's way above the other alternatives. And also I have no affiliations to anything. But in this area, there's so much competition now. So Samsung is coming with new watches. There's development, from every month or so. New things are coming on because there's so much money in this. And that is so nice because it's money in keeping people healthy. Because until now, all the big money is in big pharma after you get sick.
Yeah.
So there's a tendency in the healthcare system to just wait until you get sick and then step in and treat you with medicines that are not really effective, that you have to use for like the next 30 years or so. And that's kind of frustrating as a doctor when you know that with a good lifestyle, you wouldn't need to have any of these diseases, you know. So, and you probably see that as well in your clinic, that once people start to get in shape and do the right lifestyle, they can quit their medicines. Or what is your experience?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what we try to get them some early wins, right? Get them feeling better and do treatment to get them on the right road. And then there always has to have that conversation of like, hey, look, your body should have healed this the first time if everything was functioning how it should. The fact that you ended up in chronic pain tells us something. Doesn't tell us everything, but it tells us something. And we need to start finding your low hanging fruit and start elevating the function of your system. A lot of people today, to me, have gotten really good at ignoring signals from our body. So even if what you said earlier, even if we were good at feeling these things, the last 100 years, we've almost like tried to do the opposite, and we've gotten really good at it. As soon as our body sends us a signal, we like have a pill that covers that signal up.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
somewhere in there is where I think a lot of this comes. And it's an interesting thing that once people start looking at these things and paying attention, it's kind of like, what gets measured, gets managed. They start to pay attention to it and they start to say, actually, I knew I was feeling run down. And then I went and confirmed it, after they've been kind of doing this for a few months, that they start to actually do the opposite of what some people have said that wearables would do. And they start to tap into their body a little bit more, is at least what we see.
yeah. That's what I see as well. And as I told you, in Norway, this has been just a huge success. The book. So it's so many people contacting me every day. For the last year and a half. And they change their lifestyle, and it's so much easier when they see it on their watches because you get the immediate result. You will see, okay, what happened if I did breathing exercises? What happened if I did cold exposure? And you get the immediate result, and that is of course motivating because otherwise you wouldn't really feel these things, and then you can see that if you eat the wrong food, you get stressed. If you drink alcohol, you get stressed. So you get this immediate uh, confirmation of what you're doing, and so you're able to manage your stress levels in a whole new way, and you would feel it. People get rid of migraines, from brain fog. They find a way out to long COVID and so on. So it's been really, really useful.
Let's do that, Doc. Let's dissect that a little bit. So if you have somebody who starts to do this, they start measuring, and they're looking at HRV, and they've got a couple of wearables. How do they put that information into action in their lives? So like, should we be checking this every morning? Is this something that we should be looking at trends? Like, one of the things that I heard very early on with this is like, if you were an athlete and you were starting to be sick and we checked your HRV and your HRV was low, we'd be like, hey, do a lighter day. How do we actually use those measurements throughout making decisions? How do we make better decisions with these numbers?
Yeah, so people would do then as the athletes, even if people are not athletes. You will see in the morning that, okay, today my HRV is low. I shouldn't do this exercise, or I should take it a bit easy. Maybe I should go earlier to bed in this evening, to catch up on sleep. And maybe cancel an appointment or whatever that they know would be stressful. So that's a main point, that you wake up in the morning and get an assessment of how ready you are. The Aura Ring has a readiness score, and that's the easiest way, just to get the numbers in the morning. But the best way, with the Garmin, you get 24 hours insight, so you can see that, oh, what the trouble was working with this colleague from 11 until 12. That's where the stress comes from, or when you get home from work, you are very stressed for the next hour or so. So you can find the hot spots for stress, for example, and then try to mitigate those times. So that makes it easier. And then you can also see that, for example, if you take a cold plunge, you can see that, okay, for 3 hours afterwards, from like say 4 to 7, I was in the parasympathetic mode because of the cold plunge. And these things you would not see on your Aura. So Aura and many of the other devices would be like you get the total. If you have been shopping, you've been shopping lots of items, and you get the total, but you don't know the prices for the separate items. And then this is what you get with the Garmin. And I also think that, for example, on an app for Apple Watch called Athletic, you'll also get this 24-hour assessment. So that makes it even more manageable than the Aura Ring.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, same reason we kind of guide people to doing like, CGM, continuous glucose monitor, because now I can see. Look, there you go. So now you can, it's like same thing, right? You can go through and like, I can look, here was my uptick. It's funny you bring up cold, and I'd love to hear the things that you found that actually moved this metric the most. But we do cryotherapy, whole body cryotherapy, and that's something that I go through kind of, cycles of, I probably never drop below once a week, but I'll have some weeks where I'm doing like 3 or 4. And if I do multiple of those throughout a week, it like my HRV just starts to kind of continue to skyrocket for probably, if I do 4 in a week, I'll have 3 or 4 days in a row where it's like I'm hitting my highest level with some of that. It's not by accident that I'm also sleeping my best after that. So I think those tend to match really well.
Yeah, so cold is dampening inflammation, taking down inflammation in your body. And the inflammation in our bodies is the problem, the root cause of almost all the diseases that we are struggling with to treat. And also during the night, to have a cold room, we'll also get better sleep. Probably I've experienced that if it's a hot night and hot in the room, then your recovery during the night will be worse. So that is also a surprise, that your temperature has so much to say on your stress levels, that food has so much to say, that hydration has so much to say, would be, and sleep, and this is, for me as a doctor, if you were talking about these things, 10 years ago, that people would just look at you and just, are you crazy? What's this? What does this have to do with the disease and health? So it's so refreshing that we have now so much more insight to what regulates the basis of our body. We have been too focused, I think, on like the prefrontal cortex and our intellectual brain, and this foundation of our nervous system that we share with all vertebrates, any animal with a spine, have the same autonomic nervous system and the same kind of cells that we have, we need sun, we need sleep, we need real food, we need to be hydrated, and all these things, and that is so important, and it's been totally overlooked by the medical society, I think.
Why do you think that is? Like, is that because this was hard to measure, and we're so like as in medicine, we're so wrapped into like, we want our research and we want it clean and kind of nice and tidy. Is there another resistance to this? Why do you think this has been so kind of overlooked?
I don't really know. Probably part of it is because it was not able to measure it, until now with the HRV and these devices. And and also this part that there is no money. There's so much money in sick people, and then follow the money. It will, that's probably part of the reason.
Yeah. I'm thinking like we're having this conversation. It's interesting. I saw a patient this morning who had a nerve injury, had a surgery that injured his nerve. And we were talking about like this conversation. We were talking about things that increase or decrease his nerve pain. And he's got a few things that he does. He has a quite high sodium diet. So we've had him track meals for a bit. He also has a little bit of alcohol every day. And so we're like, okay, we need to kind of experiment with this to see which of these metrics, if we change, is going to start to kind of bring down the inflammatory load on the nervous system. And as your nerve heals, can we kind of take the stress off of it? And I'm wondering, in a situation like that, if you're like, hey, look, we'll see the change at an HRV level as well as your body improves. So if we pull the sodium out, how much does that change your HRV? If we pull the alcohol out, how much does that change the HRV? And will we see a change there before we'd see a change in your symptoms? Does that make sense? I'm thinking out loud.
Exactly. This is what I recommend in my book as well. Because my book is it's not only a book about the wearables, but it's a book about the good lifestyle strategies, compiled into one package. And there I recommend actually that when you start, you do anything different, so that you can record your baseline, maybe for a month or so that you know where you're going from. And then you start, changing one thing at a time, because otherwise you will not know where does the effect come from. And then, of course, alcohol in his case would probably be if you're sick from any cause, don't drink alcohol, and at least try it for like 2 or 3 months. And you need to do it for that long before you can really feel the difference, or you will feel something quite fast, but to know exactly what life will be with or without alcohol, you probably need like a couple of months to be sure to find out. And then you can change the other things, get more sleep. Get more sleep would probably, that is the first stage of the pulse cure, because then with better sleep, you get more power, you get better HRV, and HRV is coupled to willpower. And then you have more willpower to do the other things that are more active things, like exercising and so on. And you really need to start. And maybe, I don't know, did this person exercise?
Yeah, quite fit actually. It just
quite
has
fit,
those two, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good thing then. And then maybe look at the diet, remove ultra-processed food and have a restricted feeding window, maybe 8 hours of a feeding window from 11 till 7, for example. And that, for a lot of people, that's a really, really big difference. Because we're not made, like I said, like the technology is showing us the way back to the way that we lived earlier, to the life of our ancestors. And they did not eat, from morning to evening. They had to find the food first, and once it's dark, they stopped eating. So a lot of people with symptoms or diffuse symptoms, like stomach pain, muscle pains, headaches, and feeling fatigue and so on, when they start, having 16 hours of the day or so with no food, they feel better at once. And that is because our intestines is a very vulnerable system, with, one cell layer from the intestinal contents until the bloodstream. And of course, with the food that we eat now, is not healthy. And then in addition, if we don't give our intestines enough time to recover, it's like an open wound, many places throughout the intestines, where contents will leak into the bloodstream and create inflammation. So problem with the wrong diet and eating for too long part of the day is a big part of the inflammation that we get.
Part of this makes me think, like, is this sensitive enough that this would be your guide to, like, this probably gets a little bit complicated, but to most health changes? Like, if you have a decent baseline and you're trying to get healthier, and you're like, okay, well, I know I need to start sleeping better, and you change your nightly routine, and you want to know, A, like, am I sleeping better? But B, is this making me healthier? Is HRV sensitive enough that that's what we use to decide if our health change, whatever the new habit we brought into our life, is it helping us? Is it working? Like, because it almost makes it sound like this would be a great indicator. Is your average HRV even a slight tick up because you started drinking more water. Hey, you started sleeping a bit colder. Started eating a little bit earlier before bed. And you're like, okay, well, I'm going to do this for 2 weeks and track HRV. And then that will tell me, like, is this a habit that I need to keep? Is it sensitive enough for that? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that is my impression. And so many people contact me. And we have a social website, with 4,000 members, sharing, like if it's like a Facebook society, sharing so much information. And definitely this is my impression. Also with my own experience, but also with so many other people. So that each of these things that we know is healthy is revealed in the heart rate variability. So our heart rate, can tell us so much more about the state of our body than we as a doctor could even dream of, earlier. And it's the only metric that will show this, because almost all the other lab tests will only show something after you get sick,
Yeah.
Most of them, of course, like vitamin B12, vitamin D, and iron, and so on. Will we can use before people get sick, but usually we're dealing with metrics after people get sick.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to circle back to something. You talked about heart rate variability being tied to willpower. Can we unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. That is what I read in the book of Kelly McGonigal. She has a book on willpower, and where, for example, you can check alcoholics, and the alcoholics with the lowest HRV will be the ones who are most prone to, to take that drink, and start all over again. So HRV is a measure of your. I mean, when you're tired, and your HRV is low, you're stressed, you're not able to make the good choices. Then you buy the candy, because you feel you need or chocolate, you need to feel a quick shot, of blood sugar and dopamine, So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's fascinating. I haven't heard that. I haven't caught that. I mean, it certainly makes sense. We know that, after somebody's had a stressful week or something like that, they're more prone to get fast food or, skip the workout, whatever it might be. And if this is a measure for systemic stress, it makes a lot of sense. But I think that's a quite interesting awareness of us, is like, make sure if my HRV is slightly low, don't have the donuts in the office, don't have candy bars in the house.
Exactly, so much easier to take this poor choice, and then also, for women with rough PMS symptoms and hard premenstrual periods, then we can see in the HRV that it's as hard as a COVID infection. When I see the curves, like 4 weeks curves on Garmin, I can see that the dip in HRV down into the red zone is as deep as a COVID infection for a week or so. So it's like having COVID every week. And then, of course, when, probably women and people who have lived with women, know that that particular week, you're not so popular. And the house is a bit more mess than it was the day before, and so on. So it's and this will, they get more snappy and so on. And this and when you start, and the nice thing about this is that once you start tracking it, and then you're prepared that this week I shouldn't put the same load on, with training or whatever stress you have in your life, that you can take more attention to it, so that you do more breathing exercises or you sleep longer, then you can flatten out this curve, and then the curve will be just barely dipping, actually, because a lot of this has to do with cortisol and progesterone. So if you are in a high stress state with a lot of cortisol in your body from your adrenal glands, then the progesterone will be less. And this is what you feel. This is why you feel so bad, the week before menstruation.
So in those, the hormone, what do you think would be the precursor? Would we see a change in HRV before the hormone dysregulation, or the opposite?
Yeah, the dysregulation and then the HRV. Yeah.
Gotcha. That would be
Yeah.
your I guess easy way, unless you're measuring hormones consistently, which is going to be quite inconvenient for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at that, and we're starting to, I think what I would, if I'm listening to this, one thing that people would be trying to figure out is, as I'm going through this, how do I dissect what it means when I get the drop? Like what it means in my life whenever I start to see that HRV is going down. So if somebody's listening to this, how do they take that and they wake up and they're like, hey, I've looked at my last 2 or 3 24-hour periods, and HRV has continued to go down. I've had a couple moments throughout those days where it's happening. What does that mean for me? And how do I start to dissect? I know this is a lot because it's all health, but
Yeah. Yeah, then you have to do the detective work. It's a bit like if you come to me as a doctor and you have a fever, then that just tells me that there's some infection in your body. And then I have to find out, well, where does it come from? Is it from your sinuses? Is it from your urinary tract, from your lungs, from your intestines, from wherever, And it's the same thing, that when the HRV is low like that over several days, it has some cause, and you have to find out what it is. And then you have to find out, are you struggling in your relationship? Have you gone to the mountains, to the cabin in the mountains? Are you having a period, if you're in the fertile age in women? Have you been training too much? Have you changed your diet? It could be, or are you getting sick, from a disease? So it could be any of these causes. It could even be, that you're starting to lack vitamin B12. A lot of people using shots, with vitamin B12, they can see the fluctuations more easily. Because and then some of them say that, okay, when my HRV goes down, then I know it's time to get the shot, And then when they get it, their HRV goes back up again. And of course, you should probably really take it then before that, so you don't have to have such a deficiency that you can see it, of course. So it could be any reason, You could be pregnant, So Whoop, the Whoop band, they track their customers, they get the details of what's going on, and they can actually see that. I think it's like 6 or 7 weeks before the child birth. They can see it's a twist in the HRV, so that you can see, okay, you can predict when the birth comes, and that is of course particularly important with premature births. And if there's one specialist that needed to track HRV, it's a gynecologist, because it can tell you your fertility will depend on HRV. If you have a missed abortion, it will show in HRV. Of course, then PMS and PMDD, the more serious kind of disease part of PMS syndrome, will show. Endometriosis will show. Polycystic ovarian syndrome will show in the HRV. And of course, cancers also will show in the HRV. Once you get, and you can kind of, the interesting part, is you can Google any of these diseases and add heart rate variability, and you will see loads of research, because this is such an easy metric to get from so much research. Just get the HRV in addition to maybe other things you're tracking. So like for example with cancer, the lower the HRV, the more risk of cancer. If you get cancer, the lower the HRV, the worse prognosis. If you get rid of the cancer, then the risk of relapse, or whatever you call it, is higher. The research is not there on all cancers, but on many cancers, because that's also, of course, a load on your system.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So like, speaking of that, there's perfect because I'm always matching these conversations with people that I'm like, hey, who am I sending this to? But if we're talking about a cancer case and somebody's measuring that and they get their baseline right now, and they're going through treatment and they're trying to increase their HRV because of what you just said, knowing that if I have on average a higher HRV that I have better outcomes. What does that person do?
They would need to do, the same things, eat better. There's a great book called Cured by Jeffrey Rediger. He's a psychiatrist, has written a book on the people who survive or get well from diseases that you're really not supposed to be well from. Doing some reverse engineering and finding out that they do the same things. And this is basically the same things as in the pulse cure. And they start usually changing everything. From diet, from being in nature, from cold exposure, from get better sleep, to exercise, to get more sunshine. And so you have to do a multifactorial, approach to this. So that will increase the chances of getting well. There of course no guarantee. It's not easy. But then at least you have done your part to avoid to improve your chances of getting cancer free or not getting cancer at all.
Well, and I think it gives them some control. One of the issues with a lot of these is you kind of feel like you're out of control a bit. So to say, hey, no, here's something you can measure. Here's the changes you can start making. You have control over the direction of this to a degree, as you said. You have a unique thing because everybody talks about like improving diet or sleep or any of that stuff. But I think a lot of their outcomes are based on these subjective things. But in your group, what has been, let's dissect a couple of these things. What has been the biggest habits that people changed when they improved a few of those categories?
No, that's clearly alcohol.
Alcohol.
Yeah, that's the most effective way. So people are really shocked by the effect of alcohol. And this is also individual. So
now, is that for sleep or was that across the board of those different
across
things?
the board? Yeah,
Okay.
It's worse when you sleep. So if you drink, earlier in the day, you're finished with the stress. And when you go to sleep, if you drink, in the evening and into the night, you get stress and you get worse sleep. In addition to that, so kind of a double trouble. So that is what people change, and people, I get contacted by so many people that said my husband can take 2 or 3 drinks, he doesn't care at all. It just it doesn't make much give him much of a trouble, but I can have 2 drinks and my night is ruined. So this is all individual medicine. So this will show how your system reacts to a certain stressor or a certain factor. So alcohol is what people change the most, and then diet, to this restricted feeding window, and then they start sleeping more. So I would say that is the 3 most important. And many people also start cold exposure, doing cold showers, going out swimming when they earlier would not do it because it's uncomfortable, and also exercise. So a lot of people will, and it's often like that with habits. Once you start changing one habit, the more good habits, probably you have experienced this as well in your patients, and the more good habits come almost naturally.
Yeah, that's why I was asking about the willpower thing, because it's always that. It's that you start to do one thing good, and then something that you would have absolutely said no to 3 months ago. Now your kind of brain is more like, well, I did this one hard thing and I feel this good. Like I'm okay adding this other hard thing in, even though, in the past I didn't have the discipline to do that.
Yeah. You get more willpower. And I must say, I have done all the mistakes in the book. I used to do everything wrong, just 10 years ago, including the cold. I hated going out, swimming in maybe if it was less than 68 degrees or somewhere around that, I would not swim. But now, I can go into the freezing water and you don't enjoy it, but you enjoy the effect afterwards. And when you can see it on the watches, then it's so much easier to do these hard things. So that has been really interesting. I know also in the US that cold water, cold plunges has been a huge fad, I think.
Yeah, I think cold plunges certainly. I have quite a few patients who've done the DIY, like get a giant chest freezer and add some filtration systems and stuff. It, for us, we do, and certainly throughout the U.S., whole body cryotherapy has grown in terms of access. I think more people are at least closer to places that have and offer some version of that. So like we're in South Louisiana, it's tough to find cold water around here this time of year. You like turn the shower on cold and it's just lukewarm at this point. So
Yeah. Yeah, but even that can be, you just have to be in the shower longer,
yeah.
So there's like a time versus centigrades or degrees. So the warmer the water, the longer you have to cool off. So
Yeah. Have you heard of Cincha Labs? Have you heard of this company that's doing an alcohol alternative molecule?
I heard you talk about it. So
Yeah.
I thought I must get that, but that's available in the US only probably, or
No, actually, it just became available. I'll say it on this one. It just became available in the U.S. In the past, it was only available in Europe and kind of that side. I'm sure this was an
yeah.
FDA thing for the
Yeah.
U.S., but they just
Because
started being able to
that's
ship here.
Yeah, because that's probably the good side about alcohol, because the alcohol is such a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing, so that you drink alcohol and it releases GABA, or triggers the GABA receptors in your brain, and you feel mellow, you feel good and relaxed. So that's a good thing. But then the alcohol is converted into acetaldehyde, and that is so toxic that the liver has to prioritize this detoxification over anything else. And when you see the stress levels during the night, it's just horrible. So if you can get just the GABA part of it, without the acetaldehyde, you could probably, put it into a beer and you would be beer with no alcohol, and you'll get the alcohol effect with not the damage. So these guys may be onto something.
Yeah, I've loved it. If you heard about it, I'm sure I'm talking about it too much already. But alcohol is such a big part of our culture down here. I mean, it truly is. Like, we eat and you have a few drinks together. That is the Louisiana culture.
Yeah.
And so it's a really tough thing to get people to change that without giving them like, hey, look, I'm not saying stop this completely, because I've worked with quite a few patients who are like, even my own family is asking me, like, what's wrong with me if I'm getting together on a Saturday and I'm not having a few drinks with them. They were like, it has affected my social life and my friends. And they're like, I want to improve this area of my life, but I also like, I want to, enjoy my friends and family, and it's so ingrained in the culture. This is a problem. Obviously, we should work on from a cultural level, but that's an uphill battle. So to have your own little thing that looks, it comes in like a little, kind of alcohol looking, bottle, whiskey looking bottle, and you just mix your own little drink there, and you actually feel some of those effects, I think is a great psychologically. If we're replacing ethanol with something that, if you are in a sympathetic state, actually probably is giving you a net positive there. I still think everything in moderation. We probably shouldn't be going home and drinking 2 or 3 of these drinks every night. But if you're going to swap out alcohol, I'm like, well, okay, if you're dead set on that, I'd rather you do something like this, every night than drinking ethanol every night.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and there's so many people are self-medicating with alcohol, and not knowing that they are just creating the problem, because you feel good for that time, and then during the night, you wake up, your heart rate, is like maybe 15 points above the normal heart rate, and you wake up and your sympathetic nervous system is like in at full speed, and you are stressed, and then you feel the need for another drink, So, and you don't necessarily understand that the reason why you are so stressed in the day is because of the drinks in the evening, or at least I wasn't aware of it. Because it was this busy life as a doctor, having small children, and having a couple of glasses of wine every day was just, the reward, and you only thought that when you woke up and felt a bit sluggish in the morning, you thought that, okay, it's a busy life with the kids, but it wasn't. It was probably alcohol.
Let's circle back to exercise. I think this is a big area where HRV has been used, has certainly been researched. What types of exercise? How can we use this to improve our training, our exercise training? What types of exercise seem to elevate HRV? Is there a more effective exercise type?
I've seen research that shows that both building strength and endurance are both good, and I haven't seen any conclusion that one is better than the other. But anyway, everybody should do both. Both building muscle, because we really need muscle, and we now know that the muscles, they release myokines, proteins that works in the brain and getting better brain connections. Releases brain-derived neurotropic factor, and also we also need endurance. And many of these devices can track your VO2 max, which is a number for your fitness level. And what is so very important that I see is that if you have a poor fitness level, you tolerate almost no exercise. Like if your VO2 max is down to maybe 25 for some people, or under 30, if they go jogging for 30 minutes, they're inflamed for like 4 or 5 days, and they lose all the motivation and just feel sick. So if you have a poor fitness level, you have to start ridiculously slow and just measure it from the effect on your HRV. So this is a good way for PTs to be able to help the people in a poor fitness level and not starting too hard, and get demotivated and stop. So it's better to take it very slowly and easy. Maybe start by walking a bit, and then running and walking and running, and gradually, very gradually, increasing the strain. Yeah.
So someone like that, I would like almost expect the day they do it. So there's somebody they're detrained, right? They're trying to get this new habit. Hey, this is the year I'm trying to get in shape, and they start training for it. The day that they do their training, like that night, I would expect them to have a lower HRV than their baseline. Yep. Just as a normal physiological response. Then the next day, in the beginning of this, are they saying like, I'm not going to go back into training at that same intensity until my HRV is back up? So that gives me the guidance on it to get there. And then like, what if they're like, it's the next, it's 48 hours later, it's still not quite up there. They're like, I'm not going to make any progress at this point if I'm having to wait 3 days to go back for another 30-minute walk.
Yeah, but if you don't wait until you get the payback, you're not getting the payback for your exercise. So you put strain on your muscles and your system, and if your body's not used to doing that kind of work, then it takes longer time. So because all the muscle cells that has been damaged needs to be repaired, and they will be repaired stronger. But if you start straining yourself before that job is done, it's just going down. You're just making yourself worse. And that is where the Garmin watches are really good, because they will tell you the number of hours that you need for recovery. So a typical person then who is detrained and then does half an hour running, and gets really tired, would probably have 4 days like 96 hours. For example, me, I don't have a poor VO2 max. I have a 45, which is excellent for my age. I'm 55. But when I had a run, I tested the Garmin watch to see if is it real. So I had like a normal standard treadmill test, and then running for like 8 minutes. You just run as fast as you can. And I got from those 8 minutes, I got 96 hours of recovery time. And I felt it too. It took
Yeah.
took a week or longer, before I felt okay again. From 8 minutes, of maximum, training. So I think many people will be surprised at how much everybody thinks that to no pain, no gain. That they have to train really hard and be really tired to have any kind of use of it. But I think most people are training too hard, and that is also athletes. I've been running with she's a former Olympian, at least she's been among the four best in the Olympics, and she says of the ones that come in and testing themselves at her place, she says 95% are training too hard. And that is like normal runners. So we don't have to train that hard to get better. So, but this is where the HRV and these wearables can guide you towards the correct level of exercise.
Yeah, I know I've looked at certainly a few of these elite coaches who are kind of using this for, kind of Olympic level athletes, and a lot of their stuff seems to be like we're modifying training based on this stuff. So like, if their hard day, take a marathon runner, if their hard day is on a Saturday, then we're boosting recovery Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. They might do a low heart rate training on like Monday, Tuesday, like kind of a zone 2, almost recovery workout style. And then they're slowly ramping that back up in some of these elite athletes. We work with quite a few professional, like football and baseball. And as we're having this conversation, I'm kind of trying to picture how somebody like that would use that throughout a season, how they could improve their performance through a full season of work. What's your pitch on that? How would you see that?
Then I would say that the ones who train according to their HRV, they can train less and get better and improve. So you can just Google, exercise or training and heart rate variability, and you will see lots of research on this. And for example, after a marathon, the research has shown that half of the marathon runners have a troponin in their bodies, which is a measure of some cardiac damage, some micro tears in the heart muscle. And if you don't let the heart recover, and start training too hard, too fast, then you'll just get a stiff heart, with calcifications in these muscles. And this is why athletes don't really live longer. It's not healthy to train very hard. Often, we hear when top athletes die. You see the obituaries in the newspapers and so on. And it's quite rare that they reach, like 90 and above, at least from what I see. So I'm more often surprised that they die early than late, and I try to, as a doctor, to pay attention to this and see, what kind of people live long, and that tend to be more like artists, painters, photographers, musicians, and then and so on, that are not known to be very healthy. And if you go into the blue zones, where people live the longest, then you see that they're just moving naturally. But they're moving throughout the day, they take the stairs, they have maybe, hilly streets and so on. So they are moving naturally.
Well, and it is interesting that they have great kind of social structure where they have like lots of kind of family time, and it seems like they connect a lot more, and they they also seem, everybody was like obsessed with diet and all that stuff when we look at Blue Zone. I'm like, y'all are missing the stuff that I see that's consistent, because it seems like they all eat a little bit different. They all have slightly different things. They're not eating a ton of processed food, but their social structure is certainly different. Their stress structure throughout their lives is certainly different. And it
Yeah.
almost seemed like they have a bit more time for like for de-stressing, for hobbies and stuff like that. Whether that be gardening, working in the yard, getting with families, cooking certainly can be a big part. You brought up art. I think drawing, photography, all that stuff. What's your thoughts on kind of trying to bring some of that in? I know you yourself have quite a passion for the arts.
Yeah, yeah. So I kind of come from the photography. I partly became a doctor to travel the world and do photography and follow my interests. I've always been a freelance doctor, working hard at times and then going traveling around the world and taking pictures and so on. And I've been paying attention to photographers, and they often live a long life, but they often have to move, to take pictures. You have to move naturally, and they often get really old, compared to how they look. Often they can often look like they shouldn't be old, but they live well into their 90s and 95 and stay active. But as you say, it's social relations is the most important. So if you really want to live long, you gotta take care of your friends and family, and this used to be, if you told people that loneliness is unhealthy, and even is as unhealthy as smoking, that was unknown 15, 20 years ago, at least for most doctors. Now we know that feeling lonely, and the most important thing is feeling lonely. You don't necessarily have to be lonely, but you feel that you have less connections that you would want. This feeling is dangerous.
Yeah.
And it's as dangerous in the worst cases probably as smoking. It takes 15 years of your life if you feel lonely, and this is probably part of why we used to misinterpret alcohol and to think that 2 glasses of wine was healthy, and that was the doctor's orders, until like 10 years ago, because they were more social. And this effect was not, taken into, it was a confounding factor when we considered alcohol.
Yeah, you hear of this big, I don't know if this is kind of worldwide or not, but this push towards like adult coloring books and adult art classes and music classes. And I think at the retirement age, I encourage a lot of our patients to pick up like a musical instrument or a new language. Like, what have you wanted to learn that you just haven't yet? I've never, just pulling that off of research around brain health and stress and relaxation. I've never thought about having a measure to show them, like, look, you're playing piano 3 days a week now. Let's go back and look what happens the days after you're playing piano, or the days after you're studying photography, or you're drawing, or whatever it might be. I have no doubt that we would see some good improvements during those times if we're tracking something like HRV and body, autonomic nervous system function.
Yeah, I'm sure, and even probably just in happiness, So creativity is it's also a feature of Homo sapiens, our species. Is they could see that when Homo sapiens came about, that they were making rock art and cave art, and painting and making instruments and jewelry and all this stuff. So I think the process around creativity and making things is healthy. I find that people who are creative and use their creativity, they're more healthy, more happy than others.
I have to ask, what's your favorite type of photography?
That would be like people, travel, getting. I used the camera as a kind of a passport. When you're traveling, you can approach people and get to know them because you have a camera. It's kind of a natural icebreaker. And people were my main interest, and nature and traveling. So that kind of photography, and then over the years, as I started going to photographic workshops, there was kind of a fine art part of it too. So
I got a little bit obsessed. I was traveling a lot and teaching, continuing medical education, and a friend of mine's a photographer. He was like, "You think you're gonna remember the small details of all these trips, but you're not." He was like, "You've got to start taking pictures." So we walked for a weekend around New Orleans, and he just gave me like a very rough draft of like, here's how to not take a terrible picture. And some of them were quite still terrible, but in the digital age, that's quite okay. Just take more. So for a long time, just fell in love with photography, and for the last few years, it's been on the back burner. But it's something I wanna kind of bring back in. So I love hearing that. That gives the extra little motivation to push it over the edge, right?
yeah. Actually, the book I wrote before the Pulse Cure was called The Camera Cure. It has not been distributed in English, but it's about how to that the same strategies that you need to be successful in taking a good picture is the same strategies that you need to accomplish anything you want. You know, it's the same thought process, it's the same mode of doing things that you need, and you can practice those things doing photography, like in a practical, concrete way that is visible to yourself and others. You know, so it's. So I used to teach, probably taught, 60 workshops all around the world, and so so I learned a lot from that, from dealing with people and helping them to succeed and to get what they want. And I found that I would say the same things at a photographic workshops as I would say in a doctor's office to get people to, get the life they want. So
I love that. I love that. We're gonna have to get that translated to English. Get some books over here. Doc, where can people find out more? The books, the Pulse Cure. Where can they find that? Where can they find you? Where can they hear a little bit more about some of this stuff and dig in if they want to get more information?
yeah, the book is available everywhere, at least online. It's also on audiobook and ebook. So if you just like on Amazon or Barnes and Noble and anywhere, just type the Pulse Cure, you would find it. And we also have a social website called thepulsecure.com, where there's a blog there. There are videos. It's like a social website. So if you have a question and you find out something about Oura Ring, for example, or and then you can post it, and people will answer, because so many people there to answer these questions. So and on Instagram, I'm Dr. Torkil, and also on Facebook. So it's possible to learn there as well and
Love it.
contact
Love
me.
it. Doc, we ask all of our guests, if somebody's listening to this, I feel like we've dropped a lot of these, and they can do one thing today to improve their health, what would the one thing be?
That would be to sleep better, and or cut alcohol. To prioritize sleep and get those 7 to 8 hours of sleep that you need. Probably by winding down, the last hour or two before you go to bed. Making sure it's dark in your room, as cold as you can, which is still okay. Yeah, and then cut alcohol. If you have any kind of problem medically, you need to cut alcohol to see where you are without it.
I love it. Doc, thank you so much for everything you do. Thanks for writing, putting great information out there, getting this out into the world. I know that a lot of people are getting a lot of value and changing their lives because of some of the stuff you do. So thank you. I appreciate it. I know that spending time doing some of these things is always a little bit of a labor of love, but it's definitely changing some lives. So we all appreciate what you're putting out there.
Yeah, thank you. To you also, Derek. I've listened to your podcast, so I see that the information you give to people is also so super important. So very nice to be talking to you, and particularly as you also have this knowledge, so it's also much more interesting to me, than to talk to you as you have this knowledge as well.
Yeah, much appreciated. Thanks, Doc.
Thank you.